Perspective, presented by the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association, following our few principles of humanism.
We're committed to the use of science and reason for understanding the universe and for solving human problems. We're skeptical of untested claims of knowledge, but we're open to new ideas.
We are concerned with securing justice and fairness in society and in ending intolerance and discrimination. We are committed to the total separation of religion and government.
We affirm humanism as a realistic alternative to the theologies of despair and the ideologies of violence. We reject the concept of an afterlife and believe in living a full and rewarding life here and now.
We value and respect each individual's right to judge and lead their lives according to their own position, as long as it's respectful of other people living in a free society.
We hope you enjoy today's program and others in the weeks to follow. Thanks, folks, for being with us again. I'm Harry Greenberger. I host this show regularly. My guest today is Walter Block, and I'm going to have to read his credentials because it's more than I can remember. He is the Harold E. Wirth Eminent Scholar Endowed Chair and Professor of Economics, Joseph A. Butt, S.J. College of Business at Loyola University in New Orleans. Welcome again, Walter. This is the second show that we're doing this month, and it is concerned with government and restrictions by government. And we have established that you are still a follower and advocate of the philosophy of Ayn Rand, and that you still consider yourself a libertarian. And so all of that means you are not particularly fond of government. And so we're going to talk about possible government restrictions on society, okay? So let's just start with one.
Let me just first say I'm delighted to be back on your show.
Well, Walter, I'm glad to have you back, and I did mention on the other show that that my interview with you had more visitors than any other show that I produced, and Walter said it was because of his beauty, and I accept that explanation. All right, we're talking about government restrictions of various kinds. What about immigration?
There are two issues that are very, very controversially within the libertarian movement and also in the greater society, and one of them is immigration, the other is abortion. On immigration, there are libertarians with exquisite credentials. For example, Murray Rothbard is anti-immigration, and Hans Hoppe is anti-immigration, and both of these people are highly credentialed libertarians, and I think I'm also a highly credentialed libertarian, and I'm an open borders kind of person. I believe in open borders, and I look at this through the eyeglasses of libertarianism. So what is libertarianism? Libertarianism is the view that the law should be limited to protecting against a non-aggression principle or upholding the non-aggression principle. Namely, you can do anything you damn well please, just keep your mitts to yourself, and don't grab anyone else or their property without their permission. You can engage in sadomasochism between consenting adults or in a boxing match, and you can hit people, but it's always with permission. But if you don't have their permission, keep your mitts off of other people and don't grab their property, and that's it. And there should be no other law. That's libertarianism. So now I ask...
Now apply that to immigration.
Now I ask, does an immigrant necessarily violate this law? And if he does, then we shouldn't have open immigration. And if he doesn't, then we should.
How do you know when someone wants to come into the country whether they would violate any laws or not? How do you know that?
Oh, not whether they would violate laws when they come into the country, but by coming into the country, do they per se necessarily, just by coming here, violate laws?
All right, because right now our country presumably has an immigration policy which says you have to apply, you have to be approved, And are you saying that should stand or that should be abolished?
That should be abolished because I'm talking about violating the libertarian law, not violating U.S. law. U.S. law is not congruent with libertarian law. Some U.S. law is the law against murder, law against rape, the law against kidnapping. That's congruent. But then they got all sorts of other laws, including the law of immigration, that are not congruent with libertarianism. So I ask, by merely coming here to the United States, do you per se necessarily violate the law? Now, according to the Rothbard-Hoppe view, you do. Because what they say is there are three ways to have international economic relations. One is trade. I live in the United States and you live in Canada, and I export some cows and you import some cows. We had mutual agreement. Mm-hmm. The second case is you're a Canadian, I'm making you a Canadian. Last time I made you a murderer, a Canadian is better. And now you want to invest in the U.S. and you want to buy some acreage. So again, we have two people agreeing. And what Hoppe and Rothbard say is when you have immigration, you don't have two people agreeing. Rather, you dirty, rotten Canadian, you just come into this country without any by or leave, according to libertarian law, and therefore it's trespass. So they say, what I'm saying is that there are some libertarians, I think erroneous, who take the opposite point of view from me, and I'm now articulating their position to the best that I can. And what they say is that the immigrant who comes into this country without any by or leave is committing trespass, and trespass is a violation of the non-aggression principle because now you're grabbing other people's property without their permission.
Let me be sure I understand what you have just said. You favor a law regarding trespass.
Oh yes, certainly.
Well, because I thought you don't like government laws at all.
Well, I didn't say government laws.
Whose law is the trespass law?
The law against murder, trespass in the anarchist society would be defense agencies would support it. You don't need government. But again, I don't like to discuss two issues at one time. We should discuss anarchism.
I'm trying to understand if hundreds of thousands of people would rather be in the United States than where they live and just get on a boat or a plane or whatever, are you saying they should not be allowed in because when they step on our soil they're trespassing? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm giving the view of Rothbard and Hoppe.
Which you approve of or do not?
Which I deny.
But
first I want to set up their view, and now I want to refute it, or I want to disagree with it.
Now let's hear what, go ahead.
Okay, I'm glad, we have to stay abreast of each other. Okay, so I'm giving the view of libertarians who I respect and admire greatly, but I think they're wrong on this issue, and they say that free and open immigration is like trespass. And I say, look, the libertarian view of land ownership is based on John Locke. And John Locke said that the way you get to own land virgin land is by mixing your labor with it. Well, there are vast areas of Alaska, vast areas in the Rockies, in, Colorado, Wyoming, places like that have never been touched by human feet or human hands. The BLM, the Bureau of Labor Land Management, claims it, but they never homesteaded it. So as far as I'm concerned, it's virgin territory. So if an immigrant came in by helicopter or boat or however and started homesteading the land in the middle of Alaska or the middle of Montana or Idaho somewhere, why are they violating libertarian law? I can't imagine why they are. I think they're not. Now we have other issues. Well, there's other stuff too. There's Audubon Park. Well, suppose they move into Audubon Park. Who's the rightful owner of Audubon Park? This is a much more radical view. I think it's easy for me to make my case with unowned land. With regard to parks and streets, by the way, I have another book saying why we should privatize all the streets and roads and highways.
I don't doubt that. Go ahead.
So I'm against public property at all. And Rothbard and Hoppe, this is sort of an internal libertarian debate. Rothbard and Hoppe are also against public property. So I say if an immigrant comes to public property, whose rights did he violate? Where did he trespass? You can only trespass on private property, and Audubon Park and streets and roads and museums and stuff are not private property. So I say that the immigrant does not necessarily per se violate any libertarian law by coming into the country, and therefore we should have open borders.
Let me just ask this. In practicality, under your concept, if these thousands and tens of thousands of people wanted to come to the United States, how would they do that?
Well, what we now have is sometimes called the yellow peril, or the idea that 10 zillion Chinese or 20 zillion Indians or Africans will come and they'll overrun us and change our culture, and therefore we've got to stop it. And I say, if you're worried about that, privatize every square inch of the land, and then it would be trespass. So as long as the government allows public property, which is an abomination for a libertarian, it's sort of like the devil for a religious person, well then, tough, too bad. Namely, what I'm trying to do is uphold libertarian theory, and I'm trying to apply libertarian theory to this very difficult problem.
All right, if I understand what you just said, if all public property was privatized, then immigrants could not come in
without permission. If I want to come to your house, Harry, you have to invite me. If I just show up, I'm a trespasser.
So it would be a limitation.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Now let's get to another topic. All right.
Sure.
Let's talk about how about racial and sexual discrimination. Where does a libertarian come down on that?
Again, there is a debate among libertarians. There are the thin libertarians; those are the correct ones. I'm a thin libertarian. Then there are the thick libertarians, and they're wrong. And the thin libertarians, or correct libertarianism, says, look, the only thing you can't do is grab people or their property against their will, and that's it. And if I hate black people, or if I hate Jewish people, or if I hate women or gays or whoever it is, I don't have to have anything to do with them. I can have on my store a sign saying, no blacks, no Jews, no gypsies, no gays, no white people, whatever I want, because it's my private property. Look, in my house, I don't allow, say, Irishmen to just pick a group. I'm prejudiced against Irishmen. I'm actually not, but so I never allow any Irish people in my house. Do I have that right? You're darn tootin' I have that right. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, this is cruel. This is a big problem because the downtrodden groups have enough problems and they don't need to be discriminated against. And here I rely on two of my mentors who happen to be black, Walter Williams and Thomas Sowell. And these guys are black, but they're called Oreo cookies. Oreo cookies, black on the outside and white on the inside. The idea here is all blacks should be socialists. Don't ask why. And these guys are black, but they're not socialists, therefore they couldn't be authentically black. It's crazy. But in any case, what Walter Williams and Thomas Sowell teach us and teach me, they're my mentors. I'm honored to be a co-author of one of them, and both of them are in a book that I edited, so I'm sort of friendly with both. What they show is that this sort of discrimination is impotent to really hurt anyone. Because look, suppose I won't hire a black person. And let's say there are two people in front of me, a black and a white, and they're each worth $10 an hour. That's their productivity. And the white guy is getting $10 an hour because the market indicates that you get wages based on productivity. But the black person only gets $7 an hour because of racial prejudice. People don't want to hire a black person. Well, if I hire the black person, I make $3 an hour extra. I can exploit the black person. And how am I going to do it? The black person is now getting $7. I'll offer $7.01. Someone else will offer $7.02. Someone else will offer $7.03. And this whole thing of prejudice is impotent.
But now, it's not working that way.
Oh, it is working that way. And the reason it's not working sometimes is because the government, the dirty, rotten government interferes. Now, take this case of the back of the bus issue. The blacks had to stay in the back of the bus in Alabama or Louisiana during Jim Crow period. Why didn't somebody else start another bus company, a black person or a white person who wanted to make money? Why didn't they say, okay, look, I'm starting another bus company, and blacks can ride in the front, they can ride in the back, I don't care. Come on, people, come on down. The reason they didn't is you had to get a franchise in order to start a bus company. And guess who was in charge of giving out the franchises? The very same people who had Jim Crow legislation. It's the same thing nowadays with Lyft and Uber. The mainstream taxi companies don't like Lyft and Uber. Well, the mainstream bus companies in Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, Louisiana, wherever in the 1930s didn't much like black people and didn't want anyone else to compete. So when you say it didn't work, of course it didn't work. But why didn't it work? It didn't work not because the market didn't work. The magic of the market always works. It worked because they didn't allow a market.
Here's what I don't understand. I think under our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, the preamble, somewhere in there, all men are to be treated as equals. Isn't it? That's in there somewhere, equals. So if you deny a black person or a gay person or someone anything, that is discrimination, and he is not being treated equally. What do you say to that?
Well, I think we have a different interpretation of what equal means. I think what the Constitution means is that people should be treated equally in the sense under the law. In other words, black and white people should be treated equally if they're accused of a crime, or their rights should be protected equally. But look, Bill Gates and LeBron James are not equal to the rest of us. Bill Gates has got $72,000 zillion, and LeBron James has got a ton of money. They're not equal to you and I.
They're equal in many ways. If you and one of them is waiting for a taxi cab, you're equal. There are ways in which you would be equal.
Yes, there are some ways in which you would be equal, but I don't think the taxi cab thing is a good example. But I think that, but they're unequal in terms of money. So the Constitution can't guarantee we're all equal in every way. Look, the reason that I get so many people to watch our show is because I'm so pretty. Other people are not as pretty as I, so we're unequal that way. Look, let's take this thing about discrimination against gays. Heterosexuals are dirty, disgusting discriminators, male heterosexuals, because they rule out half the human race for love and bed partners. Female heterosexuals also rule out half the human race. Male homosexuals rule out half the human race, and female homosexuals or lesbians also rule out half the human race. They discriminate. Lesbians discriminate against all men. Male homosexuals discriminate against all women. That's disgusting. We have to have compulsory bisexuality, according to this crazy lunacy idea that we can't discriminate. But even bisexuals, bless their hearts, discriminate. They discriminate in favor of beauty, sense of humor, intelligence, the ordinary things that people discriminate against. So there's nothing wrong with discrimination. Discrimination should be a right. We should have it.
If a person was to choose their lover or their spouse, they should have the right to pick whomever they want. But if they are running a flower shop that's open to the public,
or a bakery,
or a bakery, should they be allowed to decide who they will sell to?
Of course. Look, rights are rights are rights. We shouldn't make any discrimination or any distinction between personal rights and commercial rights. If I have a right to look, I can't murder you in a party, and I can't murder you in my house, and I can't murder you commercially. Rights are rights are rights. And if it's a right to discriminate in a personal love relationship, why not in commerce? I don't look. You have white hair. I don't want to deal with you.
But here you are.
Well,
voluntarily.
I'm making a hypothetical.
Right.
Look, I made you a murderer, a Canadian, and now I'm.
And there's no one who might have wanted to be a guest on this show whom I discriminated against. I have more than once had professors from the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary.
No. You are a dirty, rotten discriminator. You discriminate against stupid people. You discriminate against people who have nothing to say. You discriminate against people that are not interesting. You discriminate in favor of people who will make a good show. You're a dirty, rotten rat discriminator. You should be ashamed of yourself.
You just made me ashamed.
Look ashamed.
what is your view of the Supreme Court 5-4 decision that said that a marriage between same-sex couples was constitutional?
Well, I think that, in the opening credits, you said there should be, some lady said there should be a separation of church and state. Mm-hmm. I think there should be a separation of government and state and marriage. Government should have nothing to do with marriage. It should be a personal contractual thing. If you want to marry 3 men and 4 women, or what is it, polygamy, or polyandry, 1 woman and 5 husbands, any arrangement that people want to make, and it should be none of the government's business.
But the problem is, and it's a government problem, that if you are legally married, spouses have great advantages, particularly in taxes, and Social Security. There's an advantage to being a legal spouse. Now, if what do you do if you got polygamy? How many spouses are contemplated? But if you are two people living together without benefit of legality, you don't get any of those advantages. So what's your position about all of that?
Well, then we should get rid of all those advantages and disadvantages. But as a second best situation, if we stipulate that we're not, and it's bloody likely that we're not, well, then I think that the government should not discriminate on this basis. The government shouldn't discriminate on any basis. Public universities discriminate against stupid people by having SAT and IQ tests and ACT.
You disapprove of that?
Absolutely. Government should not discriminate. Government should not exist. But if it exists, it shouldn't discriminate. And therefore, it should be open admission, and it shouldn't just have smart people like at Berkeley. Berkeley is a great university, and it's a public university, and they only allow very smart students and very smart faculty. They shouldn't be allowed to do that because that's discriminating on the basis of intelligence.
But you're opposed to government universities in the first place.
Right.
But you're saying a private university should have the right to discriminate or should not?
A private university should have the right to discriminate, but a public university should not exist. And if it exists, then it should not be allowed to discriminate, and therefore that would ruin it because they'd have to take stupid professors and stupid students, and Berkeley and UCLA and places like that could no longer be great universities because they'd have to have stupid people in them.
Well, all right. We have one other thing and a little bit of time left, but we thought that there are tough libertarian questions. You say there are tough libertarian questions, such as?
Well, the toughest is abortion.
Abortion.
Here we have, on the one hand, Ron Paul, who is a highly credentialed libertarian, maybe the best libertarian. By the way, I'm not really a follower of Ayn Rand. I should have corrected you. She's a follower of libertarianism, but that's a whole other issue. Ron Paul is a magnificent libertarian who is pro-life. Murray Rothbard is equally magnificent, highly credentialed libertarian. He's called Mr. Libertarian, and he is pro-choice. So libertarians are all over the lot, just as the general public. My position, I think, is the only correct position, and it rejects both. And it's called evictionism. Now, you see what abortion is really two things. One, it's evicting the baby out of the womb, and two, it's killing it.
All right, but you just said something I would not agree with. At an early stage, it's not a baby. I don't think a fetus is a baby, but go ahead.
I believe that, in the Jewish tradition, when the fetus is viable?
No.
When it graduates medical school.
All right. Okay.
I'm kidding.
But there are these people who say it's a viable human at the time of conception, which is, in my opinion, nonsense.
Well, we'll have to disagree on that. I think
But at what point then? We're talking about abortion. I'm not sure again where you stand on abortion.
Well, this is a very complicated issue, and we might not get to it fully in the few minutes we've got left. So you'll have to have me back, and we'll discuss this for a full half hour.
I knew you'd want to come back.
Oh, I love you, Harry. I want to come back, but we can spend a few minutes on this.
Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, I think that the fertilized egg is a human being because the sperm alone and the egg alone will not become a human being, whereas the fertilized egg will. It's a very young human being. It's an undeveloped human being. But take the case of a fetus that is in the 8th month. It looks just like a human being, and sometimes 8-month-old babies are born a little premature.
Yes.
I'm lucky. I'm a grandfather. I have 2 twin babies who were premature. They were born at 8 months. They were perfectly viable, and the only difference is they changed their address from the mother's womb to being outside.
What about 3 months or 4 months?
Well, at least you have to admit that 8-month babies are.
If they are, and I think the law acknowledges if they are viable after being born, then you would have to consider them a human being. But at 3 months, that fetus isn't going to mature outside of the womb.
Not with today's medical technology, but to borrow the medical technology that we use for the death penalty, surely in 200 years or 2,000 years from now, babies in the 3rd month will be viable in a test tube or whatever.
Okay, now back to human rights. Do you think a potential mother, should have the right to an abortion?
Absolutely not. she should have a right to an eviction, but not to an abortion.
I don't know what an eviction is.
And you see, an abortion is a two-stage thing. One, you evict, you remove the baby from the womb and place it outside. You change its address. That's what an eviction is. And then two, it's killing. Now, take the case of partial birth abortion, where what they do is in the 8th month is they go in and they suck the baby's brains out, and now the baby is dead, and then they pull it out.
Well, that's a gruesome thing.
That is
I don't
utterly.
think anybody supports that.
That is utterly and totally despicable.
I don't think anyone supports it.
You're wrong. Some people support that because they think some feminists think that not only does the mother have the right to evict, but also the right to kill because they don't want that man's progeny to live or something like that. So there are people that support that. But the point is that if you oppose that, you have to ask why. Okay. And my answer is because you're a good guy. You're really an evictionist. Namely, you're saying that the woman has a right to evict if she doesn't want something, because that's a trespass. Remember, we were talking about trespass.
Okay.
And one of the keys of an unwanted fetus, however it got there, whether she had voluntary sex or she was the baby was the product of rape, that fetus is a trespasser. Well, what do you have a right to do with a trespasser? Evict, but not kill. And the partial birth abortion means that you not only evict, but you also kill. And I'm saying you have a right to do the one, but not the other. And the reason we're having such trouble in this debate is because people don't make that distinction.
All right. Well, as far as I'm concerned, your position on abortion is not one that I subscribe to. Now we got just a couple of minutes left.
I'll convert you to the one true faith on this.
And what we were talking about was tough libertarian questions. You got one that you can cover in a minute or so?
Well, the two toughest libertarian questions are immigration and abortion.
We've covered that.
Right.
All right. Well, then let me ask you something else. You'd like to return again another time. What sort of topics would you like to talk about the next time we get together?
Well, I'd like to continue on this evictionism, but then there's so many other issues. There's the issue of a minimum wage law. Should we have a minimum wage law? Then there's the issue of more on environmentalism, global warming and stuff. We did touch a little bit on environmentalism, but there's much more to do there.
Global warming is a big topic.
Then there's the issue of the male-female pay gap. Why is it that women earn 75 cents for every dollar? Why do we have a glass ceiling? That women can only...
Now tell me what that has to do with libertarianism.
Which one?
The pay differential.
Oh, because there were people that say we ought to have equal laws mandating equal pay for equal work, which would be a violation of libertarian law, because libertarian law would mean that any mutually consensual adult behavior, whether it's commercial or non-commercial, should be viable. So if I want to pay a woman 75 cents and a man $1, I shouldn't be prohibited.
Our time is up once more. I thank you for being with us. I thank our audience also for being with us, and hope you will return again soon.